Right, so whilst Keir Starmer and the mainstream media appear to be utterly occupied by the frankly rancid opinings of Space Karen, Elon Musk, something that appears completely new to them, but which Twitter users, and yes, I said Twitter on purpose, X is a rubbish name, have been accustomed to ever since Musk bought the bird site. But it's far from the only story going, and one that should be of far more concern to us, and one going grossly underreported, is being slammed as a blatant attack on our human rights here in the UK, a piece of legislation that violates the Human Rights Act even. And recalling the fact that Starmer is supposedly a former human rights lawyer, you'd think he'd have noticed. Well, I'm sure in actual fact he has, he just doesn't care, because if the mainstream media aren't talking about this, then he figures there's every chance he can get away with it. And if you think this doesn't affect you, then for one, think about those it does, but also bear with me, because if he can get away with this, he can go a lot further with it later on. Right, so human rights abusing Keir Starmer is the order of the day. So what's he trying to get away with this time then, Damo? You might well be asking. Well, all of this is sewn up in what is officially being titled the Homeschool Education and Support Bill. I don't have kids, my kids are all grown up, my kids go to school, they aren't homeschooled, might be an immediate reaction to a lot of you. But I'd urge you to stick with this one, because by the end, I'm betting you'll be wondering how all of this will actually end up affecting you. Now, on the face of this, you might not think it's such a bad idea. The blurb associated with it on the Parliament website reads, "A bill to require parents who choose to home educate their children to register with the local authority, to make provision about the maintenance of registers by local authorities of children in their area who are not full-time pupils at any school, to make provision about support by local authorities to promote the education and safeguarding of such children, and for connected purposes." So in other words, homeschooled kids will be required to register as such. Local authorities must maintain such a register, ensure said children are safe and being educated properly, and take all the appropriate examinations and not be disadvantaged in future by their alternative choice of education. Now, you might figure this is largely common sense, therefore. You might be wondering how we're going from homeschool kids to Keir Starmer tearing a great fat hole in our human rights. But there is a big fat catch here, and I'm coming on to it. The timing of the second reading of this bill, which happened yesterday, given all the hoo-ha surrounding Labour being soft on grooming gangs, the attacks on Jess Phillips by Space Karen, calling her a rape apologist, and others jumping on his bandwagon without an original thought in their heads, shows on one hand Labour now have a massive problem where it comes to legislating in the interests of children, with their reputation having taken a significant knock. Fobbing the issue off onto local authorities instead of making a national plan looks bad, even if it genuinely is the better option. And I'm not going to debate that. And on the other hand, shows just how much they're hated as a government, and how quickly people will seize upon the opportunity to just give them a beasting. That's not a defence of Labour's record here either, nor even of Jess Phillips, incidentally, who in 2015 called George Galloway exactly what Elon Musk has called her, saying it was a tick off of her bucket list to do so. But the optics and the fact that that issue is getting a lot of attention perhaps undermines how much people might be inclined to believe in this homeschooling policy, and particularly the safeguarding side of it. However, the bigger issue, and the one I want to draw attention to, is the violation of human rights at work here. You see, Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights, the ECHR, the right to respect for private and family life, states that 1. Everyone has the right to respect for his private and family life, his home and his correspondence. And 2, there shall be no interference by a public authority with the exercise of this right, except such as is in accordance with the law and is necessary in a democratic society in the interest of national security, public safety, or the economic well-being of the country, for the prevention of disorder or crime, for the protection of health or morals, or for the protection of the rights and freedoms of others. This Act is of course enshrined at the heart of all UK law, but it is very broad in its concept. And I think this is why Starmer and co are pushing the envelope on it with this legislation. And certainly there are plenty of people who feel the government is overreaching itself in terms of the Human Rights Act and Article 8. Part 2 is where the notable bit lies. That line, "There shall be no interference by a public authority," and the concept of homeschooling, taking part in the home, education as a standard part of family life, is therefore protected under Article 8. So any legislation going forward, however well-meaning it might be, would be a violation of our human rights under Article 8. Now you might feel this is something the Human Rights Act was not designed to make allowance for. You might feel the legislation seems reasonable, but here's the bit that affects us all. Once Starmer and co have got their way with impacting our human rights and our right to privacy and family life here, where do you think it'll end? Do you think they won't go further? An authoritarian chap like Keir Starmer wouldn't push his luck and our rights all the more? Do you really believe that? Fundamentally, if this goes through, it sets a precedent for state intrusion into family life. Let's stick with education for a moment, though. Let's consider an example of a family with a child with special educational needs. Budgets and access to council help in such cases is already harder to come by as budgets continue to get squeezed. A family like this, therefore, who may homeschool and may do so because no local school can actually meet their child's requirements, may end up facing additional persecution if standards set by government are not maintained, stressing out families already dealing with additional needs as it is. They may find themselves at more risk of being forced to mainstream their child's education, but if that has already proven impossible, then what then? What provisions are there? Well, none, sadly. The cuts keep on coming, don't they? And with the state the economy is suddenly in, they're only going to keep on coming. Parents of kids with additional needs face a higher risk of criminalisation, therefore, when they simply lack the support they need that is too often being cut already has been. Getting a criminal record for doing nothing more than trying to do best by your own kid is what could potentially happen here. And their needs, and ultimately, is that not the very failure of safeguarding this Labour government are already being accused of on other fronts? They're setting themselves up for even more flack. This isn't safeguarding, it's persecution of parents for doing what is best for their child's needs, parenting as they see fit. But it goes far beyond just that remit. How long would it be before kids who are in mainstream school but have, let's say, a lot of medical appointments get considered a safeguarding matter under this legislation? My own children might have fallen into this category. They're not all left school by now. My daughter, for example, has spina bifida, had a lot of appointments associated with ensuring her needs were being met. There was surgery and rehabilitation at one point as well. Being off school, well, how long before there would be a knock at the door by the parenting police, for lack of a better term, checking on her well-being because she's not at school? Perhaps that can be avoided if, let's say, her medical data were relevant to the family dynamic, which then gives the government presumably a right to access that as well, as keepers a register of her school attendance. So now the government can have access to potentially her health data, as well as her education data, as well as information on my family. And who else then has access to that data? Who's handling it? And what safeguards are there then? And all of a sudden, you might be looking at your own circumstances now and realising this doesn't actually stop at education. Because once the government legislates to intrude into family life and the right to privacy, the interconnective threads of family life start to connect to other aspects, from health to work. And all of a sudden, your rights and your freedoms are basically gone, haven't they? What begins as the normalisation of government control over your parenting expands far beyond that. It might start with education, but then it can move on to how you choose to raise and care for your children, and on from there. How you choose to parent, that's a terrifying prospect. The last thing any parent needs is not only someone looking over their shoulder and judging them, heck, we all have plenty of family that do that anyway, but potentially having the power to criminalise them if they see something they don't like. Creating a culture of fear. And frankly, when the birth rate in this country is already dropping because the next generation simply can't afford to have kids, you're adding to an already bad situation, aren't you? What is being sold as an attempt to oversee homeschooling is really going to end up being about defending our rights to raise our children how we see fit, and the power grab simply wouldn't stop there. Meanwhile, Starmer and co are even more bother, implicating the Israel lobby, the Biden administration, and even how the Labour right brought down Jeremy Corbyn, all wrapped up in one package, all surrounding one man, linking everything together. Another massive scandal, as it happens, going completely ignored by the mainstream media, but hey, that's why you watch this channel and others like it, isn't it? Because you know alternative media is the only place to be, right, to get properly informed. Get all the details of that particular mess in this video recommendation, therefore, as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe to support the channel and ensure you don't miss on new daily content, more stories that you won't have likely picked up elsewhere, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.